Hello, my name's Molly Durant. They thought I was invisible. At my own family's investment gala, my mother mistook me for the help, handed me her champagne glass, and told security to throw me out. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just made one phone call. And within minutes, the $900 million deal they bragged about collapsed, right in front of them. But the real story isn't the money. It's what happens when the quiet daughter they spent years erasing finally decides to stop being polite. Would you have done the same if your own family tried to delete you? The valet line curled along the marble drive, every car a symbol, Bentleys, Teslas, black Escalades that looked more like declarations than vehicles. I parked a block away. Habit. I never liked handing my keys to anyone. Especially not on a night like this. The air was sticky with Charleston humidity, and even the breeze carried money on it. Inside the Jasper, chandeliers glowed like bottled stars, and the kind of laughter that sounds rehearsed floated through the glass doors. I walked toward the side entrance, heels steady, dress simple but precise. Ivory silk. No diamonds. No name tag. It was deliberate. The girl at the registration desk looked up with that polite half-smile people use when they're sure you don't belong. Good evening, ma'am. Name, please. Durant. Molly. Her fingers tapped the keyboard. Pause. Tap again. I'm sorry, I don't see a Durant on the list. Are you with one of the vendors? I smiled slightly. Not exactly. Another pause. That smile again, tighter this time. Perhaps you're on a secondary list. Don't bother, I said softly. If I'm not there, that's all right. She looked relieved, like I'd saved her from a scene. I'd done this before, being invisible takes practice. I walked past the registration table, through the hallway that smelled of perfume and polished wood, and into the ballroom. The music was already playing, violins layered over quiet conversation. Waiters glided between tables, balancing trays like choreography. Everything gleamed. Everything whispered, power. Across the room, my mother, Vera, was standing near a cluster of investors. The same posture she always carried, shoulders pulled back, head tilted as if she were measuring the world. Her pearls shone like armor. For a second, her eyes swept over me. I thought maybe, just maybe, recognition would flicker. Instead, she waved me over. Be a dear, she said, handing me a champagne flute, and top these off. Table 6 is dry. She didn't even pause to check who she was speaking to. I looked at her hand, the bracelet I'd bought her years ago when my company turned its first profit. She never knew where it came from. She thought it was from Isidore, my brother. I took the glass without a word. As I walked away, I caught my reflection in one of the mirrored pillars, same hair, same eyes as hers, but sharper around the edges. You taught me silence was elegance, I thought. So tonight, I'm elegant. The servers moved quickly, pouring champagne for people who didn't need it. I moved among them like one of their own, unnoticed. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd funded a third of this gala through Argent Capital's silent holdings, yet here I was, playing ghost in my own story. I passed the dessert table, where my brother was charming a group of donors. He had that southern gentleman act down to muscle memory, hand on heart, quick smile, false humility. Family legacy, he said, voice carrying just enough for me to hear. We've built something special over the years. We. That word landed like grit in my teeth. I stepped back toward a window that overlooked the harbor. The light from the chandeliers reflected in the glass, blending the city's skyline with the people inside. For a moment, it felt like looking at two worlds pressed together, the one they thought existed and the one I'd built quietly, underneath them. A waiter passed with a tray. I handed him the glass my mother had given me. "Thank you," he murmured. "You're welcome," I said, and he blinked, surprised to be acknowledged. I smiled, he smiled back. Recognition, even small, still mattered. My phone buzzed once inside my clutch. A coded message from my assistant, "All teams on standby. Awaiting your word." I didn't reply. Not yet. Timing was everything. Tonight wasn't about shouting, it was about precision. Walking deeper into the room, I caught snippets of conversation, investors bragging about margins, wives discussing renovation projects, the faint undertone of gossip. Southern politeness wrapping cruelty like ribbon on a gift. A woman at the bar whispered, "Who invited her?" Another replied, "Probably staff." I didn't turn. Let them guess. Every assumption was a mirror. I paused near the stage where the event planner adjusted flowers, and I thought about the last time I attended one of these gatherings as a daughter rather than a financier. I was 22, fresh from college, proud of my scholarship in finance. My father had smiled tightly, told me, "You're good with numbers, sweetheart, but this world isn't built for girls like you." He meant it as advice. I took it as prophecy. And I'd spent 15 years disproving it. Now, standing there, I realized I'd been invited to disappear long before tonight. My family had perfected the art of erasure, gentle, polite, devastating. They never yelled. They simply stopped saying your name. I drifted toward the center of the ballroom, the hum of conversation rising around me. A live band started another song, slow and familiar. Couples began to dance. I saw Vera laughing with an investor, touching his arm lightly as if sealing another alliance. Isidore clinked glasses with a board member, the perfect son. I didn't belong here, not because I lacked the right dress or pedigree, but because I'd stopped worshipping the myth of them. My phone vibrated again. This time, I answered. "Stand by," I whispered. "Yes, ma'am," came the quiet reply. I slid the phone back into my clutch, the weight of it grounding me. My eyes followed my mother as she crossed the floor, greeting people who owed her nothing but pretense. She looked radiant, untouchable. She'd always believed image was salvation. I took a slow breath and felt something loosen in my chest, not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. The band played louder. Laughter spiked. My mother's pearls caught the light again, and for a split second, I saw the reflection of my own face beside hers in the mirrored wall, a daughter she didn't see standing right next to her. I turned away and walked toward the heart of the ballroom. The air smelled of champagne and roses and a hint of ozone before a storm. My steps were steady, measured, almost graceful. Inside, though, every part of me was coiled tight, waiting. They thought I was background noise. But storms don't announce themselves, they arrive. And yet, no one, not even my own mother, saw it coming. The string quartet played something delicate, something designed to make rich people feel cultured without paying attention. Conversations hummed like bees over glass. I lingered near the edge of the crowd a moment longer, letting the rhythm of the room settle back around me. The lights shimmered off the chandeliers, the air sweet with perfume and champagne. I exhaled once, slow. They still hadn't noticed me. Not really. My mother was busy laughing at some investor's joke. My brother looked like a politician shaking hands for votes he already owned. I glanced at the time, 7:50. Dinner seating had started. I followed the usher into the dining area. White linens, gold plates, each table arranged like a military formation. Every place card was printed in embossed gold except one. Mine. My name, written by hand in blue ink, slightly slanted, letters pressed too hard into the paper. Someone had done it last minute, probably annoyed they had to. The cards sat at a small round table near the service door. I could see waitstaff passing through, trays clattering, a faint smell of detergent every time the door swung open. I sat down. Alone. The hum of the room swelled as others took their seats closer to the stage. The lighting softened toward them, bright, flattering. Where I sat, it flickered and dimmed, a half shadow. I folded my napkin across my lap and looked toward the front row where my family was positioned like royalty, Vera in emerald green, Isidore beside her, hand resting on the back of her chair as if to stake his claim. They'd given me the seat they thought I deserved. Just close enough to hear the applause, just far enough to never earn it. A server approached, setting down a glass of sparkling water. "Would you prefer wine, ma'am?" he asked quietly. "No, thank you," I said. "I'll stay clear tonight." He nodded, polite, gone in a heartbeat. I glanced around. The two people at my table avoided eye contact, an older couple whispering about property investments. Their laughter was muffled, cautious, the kind people use when they're not sure if you're supposed to be there. Then came her voice, Cressida. My sister. It slid through the air like a blade wrapped in silk. "I told her not to come," she was saying to someone behind me. "But she insisted. You know how she gets." I didn't turn. But I caught her reflection in the mirrored column. She was walking with her husband, the perfect accessory smile on her face. A donor stopped her. "Oh, Cressida, your family's remarkable. Is that your assistant over there?" He nodded toward me. Cressida leaned closer, voice dipped in sugar. "Oh, Molly. She just wants to feel included. We gave her something to do so she wouldn't feel left out." The words were light, airy, almost kind. They landed like gravel. I felt them hit but didn't let them bruise. I kept my posture straight, eyes on the tablecloth. My fork caught the light like a blade. You can be murdered with a whisper, especially when it sounds like kindness. Cressida laughed softly at something the donor said and moved on. I lifted my glass and took a slow sip. I could have confronted her, asked her what exactly she'd given me. But truth was heavier than any scene I could make. It was better delivered later, with precision. My phone vibrated once. A message from a number only 3 people knew. Odile Farrell. The journalist who had once written an exposé on venture funding inequities. We'd met 5 years ago over coffee in Atlanta. She'd been curious about Argent, the anonymous capital group shaking up private equity. Her text glowed, "Just saw the transfer ledger. You're behind Argent's $900 million injection." I smiled, the first real one all night. My thumb hovered over the keyboard before I typed back, "Not yet. But I could be." She replied instantly, "This gala, these people, are they connected?" I didn't answer. I slipped the phone back into my clutch and turned toward the stage where Isidore was rehearsing his speech, his mouth shaping silent words. He had always practiced that way, even as a kid, mouthing lines in front of the mirror until they sounded natural enough to be believed. The waiter came again, refilling water, setting down bread. Around me the conversation swelled with talk of returns, philanthropy, strategy, Southern decorum masking greed. I tuned them out. Instead, I studied the seating pattern. My mother had arranged it perfectly. Donors, partners, and social allies all within reach. Every seat was a chess piece, every person a move. And me, placed near the restrooms, next to no one important. Deliberate invisibility. I glanced toward the main table again. Vera leaned to whisper something to Isidore, and he laughed too loudly. For an instant, she looked past him, her eyes met mine. She didn't look away fast enough. Her smile faltered, barely. It was enough. She knew I knew. That tiny crack was all I needed. The lights dimmed slightly as servers prepared for the entree. A hush rippled through the crowd. In that pause, I could hear the clink of my own knife against the plate, sharp and rhythmic. I let it happen. A small sound in a room obsessed with control. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Anger had burned out years ago, replaced by something cleaner, precision. I'd spent too long letting them define who I was. Tonight was about reminding them how small their world truly was without me. From my seat, I could see the event staff moving through the service door beside me. The smell of coffee drifted out, and I caught a snippet of a young waiter whispering, "They said she's family, but she's sitting here." Another answered, "Maybe they're embarrassed by her." I smiled faintly. The truth always leaked first through the people paid to stay quiet. I looked down at my clutch again. My phone screen lit softly as if anticipating my touch. Odil's name still there, waiting. The future sitting in the palm of my hand. Across the room, Vera lifted her glass for a toast rehearsal with a sponsor. Isidore adjusted his tie, mirrored charm in motion. Cressida brushed invisible lint from her dress. The entire family was synchronized in performance, every gesture rehearsed. They think tonight is about their legacy. They forgot who signed the wire transfer. The band shifted tempo, preparing for the official welcome. My brother walked onto the stage, flashing that practiced smile. The crowd clapped automatically. I folded my napkin, laid it across the untouched plate, and rose slowly from my chair. Someone at the next table glanced at me. "Are you leaving?" "Not yet," I said. "Just making sure everything's in place." I walked toward the side corridor, the sound of applause echoing behind me like distant thunder. The applause from the dining area rolled into the ballroom like thunder pretending to be polite. I stayed near the side corridor, where the shadows were thicker, the air cooler. The servers moved past me with trays of wine and coffee. One brushed my shoulder and whispered a quick, "Sorry, ma'am." I nodded, watching the stage. The lights dimmed. A large screen flickered to life behind the podium. The family crest glimmered on the backdrop, Lioness in gold script, above the words, "Whitmore Investment Legacy, powered by the Lioness family." My chest tightened, not from surprise but from the quiet confirmation of what I'd expected. They didn't just forget me, they erased me. The first slide appeared, lead investor, Isidore Lioness. No mention of Argent Capital. No acknowledgement of the silent partner who had underwritten the entire structure of the deal. I stood perfectly still. It felt like watching someone take credit for the air you breathe. I didn't blink. I'd known this was coming, but knowing didn't numb it. They hadn't cut me out of the photo, they'd replaced me in it. The spotlight widened, catching Isidore as he walked up to the podium. He smiled, paused just long enough for the cameras to capture the angle he liked. "Good evening, everyone," he began, voice warm and trained. "Tonight, we celebrate a vision that began around our family dinner table years ago." I almost laughed. Family dinner table. The same one I hadn't been invited to since my father's funeral. He went on, thanking our generous backers, bowing slightly toward my mother in the front row. Without her guidance and our family's strategic foresight, this partnership wouldn't exist. The crowd clapped. Cameras flashed. My mother looked radiant, pearls shining against her throat like trophies. Cressida stood beside her, phone in hand, recording for her social feed. Legacy night, I could already imagine the caption. My name wasn't spoken once. The camera panned across the family table. I wasn't in the frame. Even the staff adjusted around me, careful not to block the view for the important people. I folded my arms and leaned against the wall. My pulse slowed instead of racing. That was the part I'd learned best, control. The thing about power is that it doesn't scream. It whispers. And when it moves, no one hears it until it's too late. I remembered being 16, overhearing my father telling a guest, "Molly's bright, but she lacks polish." He'd said it with a smile, like he was discussing wine. Tonight, the same tone echoed from the stage. Isidore moved into the highlight reel, clips of construction sites, financial graphs, smiling workers, all under the lioness name. "This deal," he said, "marks a turning point for our legacy." Our legacy. Every word carried a little theft. I glanced toward the table near the press section, where reporters were tapping on tablets. I recognized one, Odile Farrell. Her hair shorter now, but the same eyes, sharp and watchful. She caught sight of me briefly, then looked down at her phone. Seconds later, mine vibrated. "Is this intentional? They cut you out." I typed back under the table, "They never planned to let me in. That's why I never gave them control." A pause. Then another message. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer. My thumb hovered. Instead, I opened the Notes app, typed 3 words, and saved them in drafts. Phase 1, in place. The applause broke out again. Isidore smiled wider, the kind of grin that masks fear of failure. I watched the audience rise for a standing ovation, and I thought how easily people applaud fiction when it's performed in a tuxedo. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother dab the corner of her mouth with her napkin, careful not to smudge lipstick. She leaned toward Isidore as he stepped down and said something that made him beam like a schoolboy praised by a teacher. I moved closer to the edge of the room. A waiter passed, offering coffee. "No, thank you," I murmured. "Not yet." He nodded, uncertain, sensing tension he couldn't name. I stood near a pillar where I could see everything, the donors shaking hands, the investors trading smiles, the family bathing in borrowed admiration. The orchestra began another polished tune, strings gliding like they had somewhere better to be. My phone buzzed again. This time Odile's message carried a single line, "Do you want me to start recording?" I hesitated. Then typed back, "Not yet. Let them finish their story first." I slipped the phone away. Someone behind me whispered, "That's the lioness sister, isn't it? The quiet one." Another voice, "She doesn't fit their image. I heard she runs some fund on the side." I didn't turn around. Gossip was always the first draft of truth. Isidore took his seat again, soaking in attention. Vera caught sight of me standing near the wall. For a moment, our eyes met. She froze. Her expression softened, then hardened again, like she remembered something inconvenient. I smiled just enough for her to see. The master of ceremonies walked back onto the stage, announcing a short intermission before dessert. Lights brightened slightly, the band paused, and the room began to stir again. People moved toward the bar, the hum of money resumed. I stayed put. The air smelled like roses and champagne, sweet enough to mask decay. My mother rose from her chair and joined a cluster of investors near the front. Every gesture rehearsed. Every laugh measured. I turned toward the screen again, still looping through images of success, skyscrapers, ribbon cuttings, the lioness name stamped everywhere. My name wasn't there. It never had been. That was the point. The first time they cut me out of a photo, I was 10. It was a family portrait, and my dress had been the wrong shade of blue. My mother said, "We'll take another later." She never did. Now they'd just done it again, on a global scale. But unlike the girl in the blue dress, I didn't need another picture. I needed results. I walked toward the exit, each step slow, deliberate. My heels clicked against the marble floor like a metronome counting down. By the time I reached the double doors, the applause had started again, faint, then louder, echoing off the high ceiling. Let them have their applause. Let them bask. Because every spotlight casts a shadow, and I was already standing in it. When the applause began to fade and the music shifted to something softer, I stepped away from the main room. The lights of the ballroom still pulsed behind me, echoing faintly through the corridor as I walked. It was like leaving a stage mid-performance, only I had never been given a script. The air outside the doors felt cooler, less perfumed, laced with the faint smell of coffee from the service kitchen. I didn't need to flee, I just needed space to breathe. The hallway was lined with equipment, cables, speakers, trays stacked with half-empty glasses. I slipped past an AV technician adjusting sound levels. He almost collided with me. "Oh, sorry. Thought you were catering." I smiled. "Don't worry. Everyone does." He laughed nervously, turned back to his wires. The sound of my heels clicked softly against the tile. Each step seemed to echo longer than it should have, bouncing back toward the music. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes for a brief second. Behind the closed doors, my brother's voice rose again, thanking guests, promising prosperity. I could almost time his lines by memory, every phrase rehearsed from the same dinner conversations that used to leave me silent at the end of the table. I moved farther down the hall, toward a small side area where staff took breaks. Someone had left a trash bin half open beside the catering table. A crumpled napkin sat on top, beside a torn place card. Next to it was something else, white, folded once, smudged around the edges. My business card. For a moment I didn't move. Then I bent, picking it up carefully, smoothing the crease with my thumb. The print was still sharp, Molly Durant, founder, Argent Capital. The back carried a line of handwriting, faint but recognizable. My own, let me know if you need help with the Whitmore deal. I had left that card on my mother's desk 3 weeks ago. It wasn't forgotten. It was thrown away. I turned it over again, staring at the ink. A few words blurred from the moisture of someone's drink, the stain forming a small circle over my name. A deliberate afterthought. The staff door opened suddenly, and a young woman stepped out carrying a tray of champagne flutes. She froze when she saw me standing there. "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, this area's for staff only." "I know," I said quietly. "Don't worry. I'm leaving." She nodded quickly and disappeared through the swinging door. I stayed where I was, card still in my hand. They hadn't ignored the offer. They had chosen the insult. And when someone makes that choice, you have every right to make one of your own. I pulled out my phone, the light bright against the dim corridor. My messages glowed on the screen, the last one from Odile still open. My thumb moved slowly as I scrolled to the saved draft, Phase 1, in place. No hesitation. I pressed send. The message left a soft vibration in my hand, a small sound swallowed by the hum of the hallway. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, straightened my shoulders, and looked again at the card. The gold letters caught a slice of light from a passing door. Founder. I folded it once, deliberately, and slid it into my pocket. A reminder, not a wound. I could hear laughter through the walls, the muffled rhythm of clapping. The band had picked up another song, something familiar and bright. I pictured my family smiling under chandeliers, believing the world still revolved neatly around them. When I walked back toward the ballroom, the corridor felt narrower, the distance shorter. My reflection followed me in the glass panes, steadier than I expected. I paused at the corner, near where the hallway opened again into light and noise. Inside, everything looked unchanged. Waiters floated between tables with the same mechanical grace. Guests leaned closer over dessert, exchanging the same compliments. But the energy was different now. Maybe only to me, but different all the same. I stepped forward. A man carrying coffee brushed past. "Careful," he muttered, balancing the tray. "Hot." "Story of my life," I said under my breath, and kept moving. As I reached the edge of the ballroom, the scent of roses and alcohol wrapped around me again. The chandeliers threw their glow across the marble floors, catching in the sequins of dresses, the polished shoes, the silver cutlery. From the stage, Isidore was shaking hands, his smile fixed and wide. My mother stood nearby, laughing at something a donor whispered. They looked untouched by consequence. I stopped by one of the pillars, watching them for a long moment. My silence wasn't surrender anymore, it was structure. The kind of quiet that holds a storm steady until it knows where to land. Someone from the planning committee walked by and gave me a quick, polite nod. I nodded back. He probably thought I was an assistant. It didn't matter. The moment my message went out, phone lines were already shifting, schedules already rewritten. There was no need for drama. The work was already done. I adjusted my bracelet, smoothing the edge of my sleeve. The small movements helped disguise the current of thought running underneath. Odile would see the message soon. By morning, whispers would spread through the financial channels that Argent was reviewing its partnerships. By the time anyone realized what that meant, the paperwork would be halfway processed. I found myself smiling, not triumphantly, but with a kind of clarity that had been missing for years. I had mistaken silence for weakness before. Tonight I understood the difference. A waiter paused near me, offering a glass of champagne. "No, thank you," I said. "But maybe save one for later." He smiled uncertainly, moved on. My eyes followed my mother again. She lifted her glass in another toast, her laugh bright and musical. Every gesture rehearsed, every expression curated. She didn't see me, but she would. Soon. The music softened for a moment. The host's voice echoed from the microphone, thanking the sponsors. Applause rolled through the room again, polite and rhythmic. I glanced toward the windows, where the night pressed against the glass like velvet. The harbor lights flickered in the distance, boats drifting slowly under the bridge. For a moment, the reflection of the ballroom merged with the view outside, the illusion of wealth mirrored against real darkness. I took a slow breath. The air tasted like sugar and steel. I wasn't angry anymore. That stage of the story was over. What came next would be measured, not emotional. Someone behind me whispered, "That's her, right? The quiet one. Never talks." Another answered, "Maybe she's nobody." I smiled again. Maybe. The band started another song, cheerful enough to feel dishonest. I stood there, watching, calm as the eye of something vast. The glass doors at the far end of the hall opened briefly, letting in a gust of cooler air from outside. It carried the faint scent of the city, salt, exhaust, a trace of rain. I let it wash over me. When the doors closed again, I turned back toward the crowd, their laughter bouncing like static across the marble. Nothing had changed, yet everything had shifted. They didn't know it yet, but the balance had already moved. The sound of glassware and polite laughter folded back into the room as I stepped from the hallway into the ballroom again. My eyes adjusted to the golden light, the familiar haze of money and manners. The band had slowed to something quieter. Dessert plates gleamed beneath the chandeliers. I slipped through the aisles, toward the back of the room where my lonely table waited, the one near the service door. It felt different now, though. I was no longer hiding in the shadow, I was studying the shape of it. Vera looked up as I passed, her smile frozen mid-conversation. Our eyes met for the first time all evening. For a moment, neither of us looked away. She blinked first, that imperceptible pause she used when deciding whether I was worth acknowledging. Then, almost as if to erase the slip, she leaned toward a donor and laughed at something he hadn't said yet. I stopped at her table. "If you're going to erase me," I said, my voice even, "at least be honest about it." The laughter around her dimmed like a dial turned down. My mother turned her head slowly, that same calm expression she used when correcting a child in public. "This night isn't about you, Molly," she said softly. "Please don't make it uncomfortable." There it was, the same tone she used at every family dinner that mattered, the tone that meant, "You're embarrassing me." I smiled faintly. "I'll try not to." I didn't move. The pause stretched between us until she looked away first, signaling the conversation was over. But I didn't leave. I turned slightly, facing the stage where the hosts were resetting the microphone. The air hummed with the clink of silverware and the low murmur of conversations trying to pretend nothing had happened. Her perfume lingered in the air, something expensive and heavy. It brought back a scent from another house, another time. The light blurred around the edges of my vision, and suddenly I wasn't 37 standing in a gown. I was 17 again, standing in the kitchen of our old home with a letter in my hand. I had come running from the mailbox that morning, breathless. "Dad!" I'd called. "I got it." He was at the counter, folding the paper, the morning sun cutting lines across his face. He looked up. "Got what?" "The scholarship. Full ride to Columbia." For a second, there had been pride. Real, unguarded. Then it flickered, replaced by caution. "That's good," he'd said, voice clipped. "But don't make a big deal of it. Don't show off. You know how people talk. Don't make this about you. People like us don't make waves. People like us." I hadn't known what he meant then, but I do now. He wasn't talking about class. He meant family. The Linus family didn't make waves. We smiled, nodded, collected trophies, and never admitted when the ground cracked beneath us. I remembered standing there, holding that letter, my throat tightening as he patted my shoulder once and went back to his newspaper. That was the first time I learned that they feared me more than they loved me. A burst of applause from the ballroom yanked me back to the present. My hand was resting on the back of my mother's chair. She turned slightly, her voice low enough for only me to hear. "You're doing it again. That face. The one that says you're thinking of something I won't like." I leaned down, close enough to see the tiny lines at the corner of her eyes, the ones she pretended didn't exist. "You told me once that silence was power," I whispered. "You forgot that I listened." Her smile faltered, only slightly, but it was enough. A crack in the marble. I straightened and stepped away before she could answer. Isidore caught my movement from the stage and frowned, probably afraid I was about to make a scene that might ruin his moment. He'd always been good at reading rooms, terrible at reading truth. I walked toward the far side of the ballroom, to the low stairs near the stage. The crowd was still talking, clapping between speeches, unaware of the quiet shift happening at the edges of their sightline. I stopped near the foot of the steps, facing the stage but not stepping onto it. The light from the podium cast a faint halo that reached just far enough to touch me. Isidore looked down, eyebrows knitting together. I met his gaze and spoke clearly, not loud but sharp enough to slice through the hum of conversation. "Tell your guests the truth," I said. "Or I will." For a moment, no one breathed. Then someone laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. Isidore smiled tightly, nodded as if indulging me, then turned back to the audience. He began thanking our supporters, his voice carrying on like nothing had happened. I walked back down the steps, past the rows of white-clothed tables, past faces turning to whisper behind manicured hands. The sound of murmuring grew like wind through leaves. I could feel eyes following me, some curious, others sympathetic, most eager to pretend they hadn't seen anything. When I reached my seat again, I sat, spine straight. My hands were steady, folded neatly on the tablecloth. I looked across the room toward the family table. My mother was pretending to talk to someone beside her, but her gaze kept drifting back toward me, small and sharp. My phone buzzed against my clutch. I glanced down. A message from Odile, "Did you just warn them?" I typed back one line, "They've had warnings their whole lives." This was just the last one. The phone screen reflected the chandelier above me, the light fractured into tiny shards of gold. I slipped it away. At that table, surrounded by strangers, I finally felt something strange, freedom. There was no point trying to be seen by people who chose blindness. My father's words echoed again, but this time they didn't sting. Don't make waves. Waves reshape coastlines. I watched as servers brought out dessert, the clatter of plates blending with the soft jazz. A woman at the next table leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Who is she?" He shrugged, already bored. I smiled to myself. They'd find out soon enough. Vera turned once more, her face composed, but her knuckles white around the stem of her glass. She hated losing control, and she could feel it slipping one grain at a time. The room looked exactly the same laughter, same sparkle, but something had changed in the current beneath it. It was subtle, almost invisible, but real. Like the moment before thunder breaks a summer sky. I picked up my spoon, stirred the untouched coffee, and said quietly to no one in particular, "Here it comes." The next time someone called my name, it wasn't to congratulate me. It was to throw me out. The moment came fast and clean, like a blade sliding under silk. Someone called my name, and for a heartbeat, I thought maybe it was over, that I'd finally been acknowledged. Then I saw her. My mother was crossing the room, green gown cutting through the crowd like a command. Her smile was gone. She reached me before I could stand. Her fingers circled my wrist, cold, deliberate. "I've had enough of your theatrics," she said. The words were quiet, but every nearby conversation fell silent as if the air itself had obeyed her. I didn't move. "Is that what you call it? Theatrics?" She didn't answer. She just grabbed the event pass on my wrist, the gold one marking me as an investor guest, and tore it away. The rip was loud. People actually turned their heads. It was such a small sound, but in a room obsessed with decorum, it landed like thunder. She held the torn band in her hand for a moment, looked at me with that familiar mix of disgust and fear, then dropped it on the floor as if touching it might soil her. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Security." A guard, tall and uncomfortable in his tuxedo, stepped forward. He hesitated when our eyes met. My mother's tone didn't allow hesitation. "She's trespassing," she said flatly. "Remove her." The guard looked from her to me, uncertainty flickering. "Ma'am," he began softly, "I'll need to." "Do you know who you're removing?" I asked, my voice low. He froze. The question hung there, rippling through the room. The music had stopped. People whispered. Somewhere a glass clinked nervously against a plate. I didn't raise my voice, but it carried the kind of quiet that demanded listening. Vera took a small step closer, whispering so only I could hear. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "I'm just not playing along anymore." Isidore appeared beside her, his face pale under the lights. "This isn't the time, Molly," he muttered, his voice rehearsed, pleading for the audience. "Let's not do this here." "This is exactly the place," I said. "You've made it public, I'm just standing where everyone can see it." The guard shifted uneasily, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. My mother turned to him again, ice in her tone. Do your job. He took one hesitant step forward. I didn't move. You touch me, I said quietly, and your company loses its contract with this hotel before sunrise. He stopped cold. The words came out smooth, absolute. Not a threat, a statement. The kind of sentence that changes careers. Excuse me, he said softly. I fund the holding group that owns this property, I said. Call your supervisor if you need to confirm. Gasps. A ripple of murmurs spread through the guests. Someone near the back whispered, Isn't she the woman from Argent? I saw Odile, standing near the edge of the crowd, phone already raised, her expression unreadable. She didn't need my permission, the story was writing itself. Vera's lips tightened. You're bluffing. You taught me to, I said. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The color drained from her cheeks. Isidore tried to recover. Everyone, let's just sit down. But no one sat. The moment had already turned. I stepped away from them, into the open space near the center of the ballroom. All eyes followed. I didn't shout, didn't gesture. Don't worry, I said calmly. I'll leave. But you won't forget what happens next. The silence was total. Even the air felt heavy. I could see a server in the corner, frozen mid-pour. My mother's voice cracked slightly when she spoke again. Enough, Molly. Exactly, I said. Odile's phone light flickered once, then steadied, recording. I turned to the guard again, met his eyes. You've done nothing wrong. But you'll want to stay out of what happens next. He nodded slightly, stepping back. No one else moved. For a second, I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who thought approval was love. Then I thought about the woman standing there now, surrounded by everything she'd built without help. The contrast was almost funny. The murmuring started again. Someone whispered, She's the investor. Argent's hers. My mother heard it too. Her head jerked slightly, denial flickering behind her eyes. That's ridiculous, she said, too loudly. She's always been dramatic. I looked at her. No, mother. Just patient. The crowd's energy shifted, sympathy, curiosity, unease. Guests exchanged glances, deciding which side of the story they wanted to stand on. Isidore tried to step forward again. Molly, please. I raised a hand slightly, stopping him without touching him. Save your breath. You'll need it later. He froze, caught between loyalty and self-preservation. Someone near the back whispered, She warned them earlier. Another voice, She said she'd tell the truth. Odile's phone caught all of it. The video lens blinked red. I adjusted the strap of my clutch and looked at my mother one last time. You wanted me gone. You'll get your wish. But you'll wish you'd chosen silence instead. Then I turned toward the exit. The security guard started to follow out of reflex but stopped when I glanced over my shoulder. Don't, I said gently. You've done enough. He stepped back. The rest of the room parted like water. I walked slowly, deliberately, not rushing. My heels clicked against the marble, each sound crisp and even. People moved aside without speaking. Phones lifted discreetly. The sound of recording notifications chimed like distant bells. Vera's voice followed me, sharp but shaking. You walk away from this family, you walk away from everything. I didn't turn. That's the idea. When I reached the door, I looked back just once. My mother stood rigid, holding the torn band in her hand, realization finally catching up to anger. Isidore stared at her, face blank, as if waiting for instructions that wouldn't come. Odile lowered her phone. Our eyes met across the distance, and she gave a small nod. She already knew what the footage would do. I pushed the doors open. The cooler air of the lobby met me like freedom. Behind me, the ballroom stayed silent for 3 long seconds before the noise rushed back, whispers, questions, disbelief. They tried to throw me out quietly. Instead, I made my exit unforgettable. By the time I stepped out into the night air, the warmth of the ballroom had already begun to evaporate from my skin. It wasn't cold outside, not really, but something about the shift in temperature made the silence feel sharper. The valet circle was buzzing with activity, cars pulling up, guests stepping out to make calls, some lighting cigarettes with trembling hands. They didn't look at me. Not yet. I moved to the far edge of the drive, near the large potted palms. Out of the line of sight, but not out of the moment. I could still hear the faint murmur from inside, voices too muffled to understand, but intense enough to feel the tension. It wasn't just the echo of the ballroom. It was the thud of something beginning to fall. I opened my clutch. The phone was already on. I scrolled past the texts, the pings, the missed calls that had started even before Vera tore the pass from my wrist. There it was, a secure contact labeled R. I tapped it. It rang once. Phase 2, I said. Pull everything. No delays. Understood, Ms. Durant. I hung up. The screen went black. And with that, the storm launched. Inside, it started like a ripple, just a small wave cutting through the surface of the room. A phone buzzed. Then another. A chime from someone's watch. A gasp. Confused murmurs. Then the phone started lighting up in unison. I watched it unfold through the glass doors. Guests glancing down at their devices, brows furrowing, heads turning. A woman dropped her fork. Someone near the dessert bar cursed under his breath. One man stood so quickly his chair toppled behind him. Across the room, I saw Isidore glance at his phone. His expression shifted instantly, first confusion, then disbelief, then panic. He looked up toward Vera, who was already clutching her own phone, mouth slightly open. Push notifications. Breaking headlines. Argent Capital pulls $900 million from Whitmore project, deal collapses. Investor walkout begins at Charleston Gala. Inside the deal's death, exclusive. I didn't need to go back inside to see what was happening. I knew every beat of it. I stepped back into the hotel lobby, heels quiet against the marble. Guests who had just watched me exit with silence now turned their heads with wide eyes. Some pretended not to stare. Others whispered openly. Odile was waiting at the edge of the main corridor, phone in hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just gave a small nod and pressed send. The video was live in seconds. The footage was clean. No dramatic music, no edits. Just a woman in ivory being stripped of her pass, told to leave, and walking out without a word of defense, just control. The caption said it all, this woman just collapsed a $900 million deal with one phone call. And they didn't even know her name. By the time I reached the threshold of the ballroom again, the room was a different world. Delphine Mercer was standing near the stage, flanked by her team in tailored black suits. Calm, direct, unshaken. She spoke with the hotel manager in a voice clipped and composed. When she saw me, she didn't smile, didn't wave, she simply stepped aside. We received a call 15 minutes ago, she said, loud enough for the front tables to hear. We'll take it from here. And she walked right past Vera. Past Isidore. Didn't glance at either of them. My mother turned slowly, her face a mask of practiced grace cracking around the edges. The guests parted as I re-entered the ballroom. This time, it wasn't because I didn't belong. It was because they had finally realized I did. I walked toward the center, where a small circle of frozen silence had formed around Vera and Isidore. Someone tried to speak, but the sound died before it found footing. "Now that I have your attention," I said, my voice clear and even, "I've decided it's time to finish what you started." Cressida stood near the edge, phone in hand, eyes wide. She didn't raise it to record. She didn't need to. She'd finally understood the camera wasn't hers to wield anymore. Odile moved quietly along the side, capturing expressions, reactions, whispers. Someone whispered near the bar, "She's Argent." Another voice, "All this time." I stopped in the same place where Isidore had given his speech earlier, facing the same audience that had applauded his name over mine. "I built the foundation for that deal," I said. "Every number, every clause, every risk model. And I offered them a chance to be part of it. Quietly. With respect. They declined." A few gasps. One older man stood, looked toward Isidore, then turned away. "Tonight, you watched them erase me. Publicly. Proudly. And now you're watching them pay the price." I didn't raise my voice. The calm was part of the weight. Delphine stepped forward, holding up a signed agreement. "Effective immediately," she said, "all contracts will be executed through Mercer Holdings. Argent has transferred oversight. All existing relationships with Whitmore and Liness Holdings have been terminated." The press near the back scribbled notes. Phones caught every word. Vera didn't speak. Isidore looked like he might. But nothing came out. I turned toward them. "I didn't need to embarrass you. You did that yourselves. I just stopped cleaning up after you." Then I turned back to the crowd. "I don't need you to applaud. I don't need validation. But I needed the truth to be seen. And now it is." Odile posted again. I saw the notification flash on someone's phone beside me. The video had already hit trending. Comments poured in beneath it, people recognizing the voice, the face, the calm. I stepped away from the center, not toward the door, but toward the back where Delphine stood. She extended her hand. "Let's finish what we started," she said. I shook it. And just like that, the room shifted again. People weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. Calculating. Deciding. And this time, they were looking at me. Silence followed me like a shadow as I stepped down from the makeshift stage, the echo of my words still hanging in the air. I didn't look back. Not at the stunned faces. Not at Vera. Not even at Isidore, whose hands hung limp at his sides like a puppet with its strings cut. The applause hadn't come. Not that I needed it. Applause is cheap. Truth costs. The moment my heels touched the floor, I felt the change in the air, dense, brittle, like the seconds before glass breaks. Donors exchanged looks. One woman whispered to her husband, "She's the investor. The real one." Another murmured, "Why didn't anyone tell us?" As if they hadn't been told. As if it wasn't easier to believe the lie wrapped in family names and hand-polished smiles. I took 2 more steps forward. That was all it took for Vera to move. She cut through the crowd like a blade, each step calculated. But her grace had cracks now. Her jaw clenched tighter than I'd ever seen. When she finally reached me, she didn't lower her voice this time. She didn't mask the rage behind civility. For once, the gloves came off. "You humiliated your family," she snapped, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You embarrassed all of us. Why would you do this?" I turned to face her. Not flinching. Not apologizing. Because humiliation only works if I let you define it. Her eyes narrowed. She opened her mouth again, but Isidore stepped in between us, trying to salvage what was already crumbling. We can fix this, he said quickly, his voice teetering between desperation and denial. This doesn't have to blow up. We'll make a statement, clarify. I cut him off. You can't fix what you never built, I said, turning to him now. You stood on work that wasn't yours. You made a career out of my silence. You didn't think I'd notice you standing on my back. He froze. Someone gasped. Cressida, from the side of the room, lifted her phone again, but even she looked shaken now, no longer the composed spectator, just a sister caught in a spotlight she thought would never land on her. The crowd shifted. I felt it physically, the weight of attention turning, not just watching, but judging. The kind of judgment that sticks. I walked toward the stage once more. This time, I didn't stop at the stairs. I didn't reach for the microphone. I simply turned to the crowd, facing them fully. My name is Molly Durant, I said, letting each word settle before I continued. I funded this deal. I structured it. I held it together while this family smiled for cameras and cut ribbons they didn't pay for. I scanned the room. No one looked away now. I pulled the deal because I will not allow my name to be spoken only when it's convenient to your image. Vera didn't move. Her face was frozen, not with anger, but something colder, recognition. Someone at the press table stood. Notepad in hand. Recording. No one stopped them. I took one last step forward. Close enough that she had to hear me. Just her. You asked why, I said quietly. Here's why, I just took back what was never yours to keep. There it was. The final crack. Vera's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of everything finally settled in. She didn't speak. Didn't even blink. She just lowered herself into the nearest chair like someone too tired to pretend anymore. Odil's live stream pinged in my pocket. A message flashed on the screen, 1.2 million viewers. And rising. Isidore stepped back. One hand through his hair, eyes darting toward the exits. Cressida turned, walked off without a word. The room shifted again. Donors were already moving toward Delphine, who was calmly speaking with a group of Mercer investors. She hadn't reacted during the confrontation, hadn't needed to. She didn't win the deal tonight. She inherited it from people too foolish to know what they lost. A man in a navy suit approached me, tentative. Ms. Durant, he said, clearing his throat, if you'd be willing, we'd like to speak about a new board structure. I raised a hand, gently but firmly. Tonight isn't for planning. He nodded quickly and retreated. The lights from the chandeliers had lost their shimmer. They didn't seem golden anymore, just bright and unforgiving. The music had stopped somewhere in the middle of everything, and no one had restarted it. No one dared. I stepped down from the small rise of the stage and moved across the floor slowly, my stride even, not triumphant but resolute. I didn't need to look back. I didn't need to see them scrambling to rewrite the story. The truth had already written itself. At the edge of the room, Delphine nodded toward me. You good? She asked, low and steady. Better than I've been in a long time, I said. She looked toward Vera, then back at me. That took guts. No, I replied. It took remembering who I was before they taught me to forget. I kept walking. As I neared the exit, I passed a small cluster of caterers and hotel staff, standing awkwardly along the wall. One of them, a woman with silver streaks in her hair, caught my eye. She nodded once. Not big. Not loud. Just enough. I nodded back. The gala didn't end with a bang. It fizzled. Quietly. Awkwardly. No speeches. No closing remarks. Just plates being cleared and chairs being pushed back too fast. The great lioness image, perfect, powerful, untouchable, cracked under the pressure of its own pretense. And when it shattered, no one reached to pick up the pieces. As I stepped out into the lobby once again, the air met me like freedom. Cool. Real. I didn't stop walking until I was past the main doors. Past the valet stand. Past the flashes of cameras and the calls of names that weren't mine. The city was waiting. And I was done being quiet. But not every victory feels like one when you're winning alone. The doors closed behind me with a soft thud, not the triumphant slam I might have imagined years ago. I didn't look back. Not when I passed the reception desk, not when the valet offered to bring my car around. I shook my head gently and kept walking. My shoes clicked steadily against the stone path, echoing in a way that made the empty night feel fuller. It wasn't cold, but I pulled the shawl over my shoulders anyway. Habit, I guess. There's something about the end of a confrontation that leaves the air thinner around your skin. Guests were still trickling out behind me. Some in silence, others speaking in hushed tones. I heard my name once. Then again. But no one called it out loud. I stepped off to the side of the roundabout, near the catering exit where staff loaded trays and carts. That's when I saw her. Bent slightly, balancing a stack of dessert plates on her arm, was a woman with hair pulled into a tight bun, silver threaded through dark brown. Her hands moved with muscle memory, the kind that stays even after decades off the job. She looked up. Stopped. And smiled. Miss Molly. The sound of her voice took something out of me I didn't realize I'd been holding. Mrs. Nettie? I asked, almost whispering. She set the plates down and walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hug was immediate, soft, warm, and completely unbothered by the $1,000 fabric of my dress. For the first time that night, I didn't pull back. They never said it out loud, she murmured, still holding my arms. But I knew. Always did. I looked at her, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Not sadness. Not victory. Just release. You were the only one, I said, who ever looked me in the eye when I was little. You were the only one who ever looked back, she said, simply. She brushed my cheek with a hand that had once tucked me into bed after my parents had gone to some fundraiser. You were always gonna make it. Not because of them. In spite of them. The words settled somewhere deeper than applause ever could. A call came through on my phone, but I didn't answer. Mrs. Nettie nodded as if she understood. I should get back to the dishes, she said with a wink. They won't wash themselves, even when the ones eating think they're too good to notice. We both smiled. She left, and I stood there a moment longer, letting the quiet take its shape around me. I checked the time. 10:06 p.m. Odil's text came through next. They're scrambling. One investor just pulled out of all Lioness projects. LinkedIn's blowing up. You're trending in 6 countries. I stared at the screen, then typed back. It's not about collapse. It's about correction. She replied with a single heart emoji. I let it sit there, unread. By the time I reached my car, the valet handed over the keys without a word. Just a nod. Nod of recognition. Of respect. The ride home was silent. I didn't turn on the radio. I just watched the road blur by, streetlights casting stripes across my windshield like a slow-moving barcode. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on. I hadn't remembered leaving it that way. I walked into the house, slipped off my shoes, and made my way to the kitchen. There was still tea in the kettle. I reheated it quietly, poured it into a wide mug, and carried it out to the balcony. The city below hummed, distant and unaware. My hands wrapped around the cup as I stepped closer to the railing. The breeze pulled at my hair gently, like fingers from an old friend. I opened my laptop. A draft press release waited in my inbox, finalized by my team hours earlier. Argent Capital announces new initiative, investing in women-led ventures across the Southeast. Phase 1 launches this fall. Over $500 million committed to founders who've been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly erased. I hovered over the send button for a moment. Then I clicked. Legacy, I realized, isn't about what people remember about you. It's about what outlasts them. The screen dimmed. I sat back in the chair, still holding the mug, steam curling up around my face. My mother, my siblings, they weren't villains in the theatrical sense. They were just practiced at pretending their version of reality was the only one that mattered. But tonight, the illusion broke. And I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to burn their house down. I just had to stop holding the door open. Another message flashed. CNN wants a quote for the morning. I smiled but didn't respond. Not yet. The stars above the skyline were faint, but they were there. You just had to stop looking at the lights below to see them. I closed my eyes and let the quiet fill me. Not healed, but whole enough to begin again. Because sometimes, the most powerful room you'll ever walk into is the one you choose to walk away from. Sometimes, the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the people who raised you. This story wasn't just about a lost deal or public humiliation. It was about reclaiming power when silence is no longer an option. Have you ever been made to feel small by your own family? Left out, overlooked, or pushed aside? Share your story in the comments below, we read every one. And if this hit close to home, make sure to subscribe.